Okay, for our final topic today, we wanted to talk about market developments. It's sort of been a tale of two cities this week. On one hand, OpenAI has raised $40 billion. Just for by way of comparison, some of the last record-breaking raises was Stripe for 6.5 billion, SpaceX 2 billion, ByteDance 5 billion, Databricks 1.6 billion. When Uber, when we were raising 1 or 2 billion at a time, that was seen as like, holy shit, what the hell is going on? Um, to raise $40 billion in one go is just, insane amounts of money. But I think everyone can understand how and why that's happening. That was at a valuation of 300 billion post money. But on the same week, at the same time, we're also seeing the CoreWeave IPO, which was, by all accounts, a pretty big failure and huge market volatility. The Magnificent Seven is down 20 some percent. It's kind of going down to the right pretty rapidly. Everyone is running for the exits. It's fear, uncertainty, and doubt all over the place. You can blame tariffs, you can blame, bubbles popping, you can blame whatever you like. But it is really, in the private markets, huge money, huge valuations for one of the most important companies of the decade, or of the world, of the history, really. And another quote unquote AI play, CoreWeave, and the AI, Magnificent Seven, all going pretty rapidly down to the right. Hooman, you are a deeply experienced entrepreneur, capital allocator. You've seen all this stuff from the inside. What do you make of these two dichotomous signals? And what should we make of it? And where are we going in the short term, and the medium term, and the long term?
So I think with OpenAI, I think you're seeing the cementing, or at least the support, cementing in the winner, if you will, from the valley. So for better or for worse, the stage is set. And I do think in the next 2 to 3 years, and I'm actually going to assume the next year, you're going to start seeing them using this war chest to decimate the startup ecosystem at this point. So you're going to see the culling coming, in particular as they release their agents. My prediction is that it probably starts with the high profile developer agent that they're building. And we'll see how the resilience of the cursors and Windsurf, and they're great products. I'm not suggesting that they're bad companies, but the ones that went to 0 to 100 million really quickly, let's see what the resilience are. So the question is, are they going to have their proverbial Netscape moment where, OpenAI is call it the Microsoft of the world, and we'll see what happens there. That's one. On the flip side, I think you're starting to see the correction on the public markets. And I do think, to your point, Chris, there's a lot. We could unpack this on a whole episode, if you will, because that's tougher. But I think there was a huge movement of capital into, the Mag 7. And I do think we're seeing, at least at the minimum, the correction there, where people are saying, all right, wait, we got to hold back. CoreWeave in and of itself, my personal opinion is, I don't know if that's indicative of the market. I think you have a data center company that got valued as an AI company, and you're just seeing the market rationalize it like it's a data center company. So I almost treat that as an outlier. It doesn't bode well necessarily for the IPO market, but I don't think in and of itself it's a sole data point. We have to see Klarna and others to really get there. I don't envy the going public in this choppy market. It's not the safest sea to go out from port.
I actually think this bodes really well for the public market, because what I don't think we're seeing is what I would classify as irrational exuberance. I think, in the dot-com era, you put dot-com at the end of any word or string of words, and it was, worth infinity. It would go up and to the right. They had no business model, no revenue, no nothing, massive costs. And I think the market is sort of digesting a CoreWeave and going, no, that's not an AI company. No, thank you. And and looking at an Nvidia or a Microsoft or a Google and going, no, we're not going to let that get ahead of its skis. We're going to just bring the PE ratio down a little. And everyone seems utterly paranoid about the next dot-com bubble and the irrational exuberance and the ZERPy FOMO. And I think that's just keeping everything in check in a really healthy way. And your Nvidia is actually quite cheap. It's really cheap. It's cheaper than AMD and Intel, I think, but based on just forward, PE. And so I think this is actually really good news. And I think that as long as we maintain a kind of clear-eyed optimism, continue to roll out infrastructure, continue to rotate and roll over the world economy to AI. I think us in tech, us as maybe more professional capital allocators, and then just retail investors using Robinhood. I think this is good for everything. The only question is, can Mr. Pro Growth, Pro Business Trump continue to rattle everyone's cages and end us in some place that seems vaguely stable? That's the question mark for me.
To take the opposite side of that, though, Chris, I think that there is a case to be made that we have a bubble here, or at least a level of exuberance that's only going to pay off if the optimism around of AI turns out to be true. If you look at the AI industry writ large, it is still a burner of capital. Why does OpenAI need to raise $40 billion? That's because they're burning money like it's going out of fashion. You can say the same of any highly valued AI startup, right? They are spending a lot more money than they're making. And I think that then, second order, flows through to NVIDIA. You're like, well, why is NVIDIA not more highly valued? It's because although they are highly profitable, their profits are still coming at the expense of VCs, right? Do you remember the golden days of like food delivery and all of that stuff? We call it the VC dividend, right? We as normal citizens are basically being subsidized by VCs pouring money into these cash burning machines, right? We're subsidized by VCs. NVIDIA is getting subsidized by VCs. And so the question is, at some point, this industry needs to start returning huge amounts of capital to make up for the huge amounts of capital that have come in through investment. And if that doesn't happen, that will look not unlike a bubble bursting, right? And so I think fundamentally, probably within the three of us and a lot of our listeners, we would say we are AI optimists. And so at some point, the value generation, the value capture will catch up to all of the capital that's being deployed. But we're not there yet, and things could go wrong.
Yeah, and to be clear, I think I agree with you very strongly. We have to distinguish in the public market and the private market. They're related, correlated, but not necessarily always moving in sync. I think what the public market has said with CoreWeave is, okay, fundamentally, I still think actually, if you look at it as only a data center company, potentially, and I think it's a good business. I don't say that I'm not trying to comment on the quality of the business. I'm just saying the multiple relative to data center companies is fairly high still, just to be clear. It's always been high. I mean, they buy chips, they buy land, they deploy it. Like there's DigitalOcean, $6 billion company, right? Like, so you could study that and say, hey, how is this fairly valued? Can other companies go order chips and put them in the data center? Yeah, sure, they could. But I think when we look at AI itself, I think when you look at the liquidity point that you made is a really salient one. Right now, we're still fairly liquid. Wiz was a great, or is hopefully going to be like this great outcome that's starting to drive liquidity. But you have so many people who are waiting on liquidity here. And I think the AI in particular, and I am definitely all for AI in the agentic future. I just cannot see a world where this doesn't end pretty badly for quite a few investments. You can't have 100 foundational model companies that are going to all be worth what OpenAI is. It's just like not possible. If you really truly believe in this AI enabled world, there have to be some brutal losses that are going to occur. And I think there's too much capital that's deployed against these AI strategies too fast. And that is the nature of it. And I do think we're going to have a bubble, and I do think you're going to have some correction. The question is not to me, this is my opinion, whether or not there's a correction or not on the AI space. And I think simultaneously AI is going to succeed and there's going to be a correction. The question is, what's the nature of that correction and when's it going to happen? Because like I'm looking in venture, how many companies are getting $100 million pre's with like 5 dudes in another foundational model? You just look at the rate of change and you just can't have it. It's not, they're going to hit the public market, and OpenAI is the best and the biggest ever. And they're just now like trying to tap and cross 20 billion. That's cool. But like Google's looking at it like, come on, man, like 20 billion, like hand me my beer,
Yeah, no, this is the most important part here is we need to separate public and private. So what I was referring to is the public markets. So in the private markets with VC, there is absolutely irrational exuberance. There is people just piling into deals, oversubscribed deals, paying whatever valuation. That's no question there. What I'm talking about is in the public side, and you talked about VCs funding this, Yaniv. When it comes to NVIDIA revenue, according to ChatGPT here, 70-80% of NVIDIA's revenue is coming from the Magnificent Seven. It's not coming from startups. It's not 5, that's 5 or 10%. So this is not VC money pumping things. This is balance sheets of these massive players who had massive, war chests, dry powder, and have been trying to figure out how to deploy it somewhere because they didn't know what to do with it. And they finally, the moment has come. They're like, okay, we have a massive platform shift. We have a chance to, as I said earlier, take over cognition globally, all intelligence everywhere for physical and mental labor. And they're going, there's no amount of money you can spend on this that won't be paid back. That's their bet, right? And they're spending their balance sheet on this while making record-breaking profits year after year. Their PEs are not that expensive, so their valuations are justified, and they're all pouring their capital into NVIDIA, and NVIDIA's PE is fairly conservative for a high-growth startup. Now, where I can see a bubble forming is if they decide, well, we've finished rolling out this infrastructure, or we're overbuilding or something, we need to massively back off. Now, NVIDIA suddenly looks like, there's something pops there. But my bet is that when you start running the world's cognition, that's more GPUs, not less. And that is another 10, 20-year cycle of compute infrastructure build out. So when I talk about things feeling relatively clear-eyed, I'm talking about a build out for an economy changing platform shift by companies that are making serious money, that have serious cash on their balance sheets, and they're spending it to do a serious transition with valuations not overinflated on the public markets. This feels pretty good to me on the public side. On the private side, it's a shit show. That's a different story.
Oh yeah, I would say, look, on the public market side, I'd say your points are well received. I mean, these companies, these mega platform companies, the only thing that can stop them is regulation at this point. So I do think they're well considered and they're going to do well. I do think the private markets are going to hit a wall in terms of this particular AI wave.